Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are reviewing the first round of the Stanley Cup playoff, as well as previewing round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. And thanks for joining us here on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe down below. And if you're joining us here on somewhere else other than YouTube, check us out, youtube.com/I80 Sports. Drop a subscription. We just crossed over the 800 plateau, which is amazing to me. It's really kind of crazy to think that we're already up that high. And thank you guys all so much for your continued support. Really, we can't do this without you guys. But join the conversation down below. Drop a comment. Let us know what you guys thought of the first round and what you think is going to happen in the second round. We want you guys to join the conversation. If you like what you see, make sure you drop a like because it always helps. And you can check out our content as well on our website, i80sports.com, where besides just our NHL content, you can check out our NFL, MLS, NCAA football, NBA, and wrestling content there as well. While you're there, get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8 in our shop. And if you're on Twitter, follow us down below at I80_sportsNHL. And if you follow us already, thank you all so much because we greatly value all of your support. We're really close to 1,000 followers, by the way. It'd be really, really great if maybe we can get a little bit more support from you guys. So make sure you follow down below. But we're here. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm coming off a big one last night, big OT win. Artemi Panarin. Somebody asked me today, is it as big as Mento? Well, I don't really remember Mento. I was 6 years old, but it's right up there with Derek Stepan back in 2015. That I remember very well.
Gotta love it. I mean, for me, I don't love it, but even still. Moving right along. Now, before we continue onward with our first round review and second round preview, as we're here to do, just want to mention here real quick. Yeah, we're well aware of the news that's kind of ongoing in the NHL right now with coaches firings and entry-level contracts being signed by top prospects and upcoming draft news as well, as along with the lottery that just happened last week. Go Devils. But we're going to save that all for a catch-up episode. We're going to let the Stanley Cup playoffs breathe, give it the showcase that it needs, and we're going to recap everything as it's been going on in a catch-up episode once the Stanley Cup playoffs has concluded. So look for that episode where we give you our reactions to everything going on in between all of this. But for now, time to review round 1. Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here real quick. Do you think you can give us a quick rundown of how each series was won, who won, and in how many games?
Okay, quick rundown. Well, we had, would you want me to go by division?
Yeah, that would be great. Just go by division and just do it that way.
Yeah, we sure can. We can do that. Quick rundown here. We'll start with the Atlantic Division. We had the Florida Panthers and Washington Capitals 4-2 series win by Florida. Kind of shocked me a little bit. Not so much shocked me. I can't believe Washington was in it, and there was one game where I thought Washington was really in control. Next series, Toronto and Tampa, the 2 versus 3. Toronto blows it in 7 again. Tampa wins, defending champions, 2-time defending champions, have a chance at a third one. Carolina versus Boston. Carolina won it in 7. I thought Boston would have won it. After the first 2 games, I thought maybe Carolina was going to sweep it. It was an interesting series. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on. But 4-3 to Carolina. My favorite team, the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Series I thought would be a walk in the park for the Rangers really wasn't. They never were really in control of it, but at the same time, they never let it get taken away from them either. Rangers win it 4-3. They win it in 7. All 3 times they were facing elimination, were down by goal, were trailing, and came back to win each game. First time ever in NHL history anybody has ever done that. Young and upcoming team. I'm not going to toot their horn as much because this is a NHL show, not a Rangers show, but step in the right direction for the Rangers. In my eyes, season success. They won a playoff series, and that's what I said they had to do. Moving over to the West, Colorado versus Nashville. Nothing really to see here. 4-game sweep by the Avs. Cup favorites. Can't really talk much about it. Minnesota and St. Louis. This was one that I thought was going to go 7 as well. And it was kind of a back-and-forth series. It wasn't as close as I thought. There were a few blowout games. And actually, there weren't really. None of these games were close. I'm going to put it out there. None of these games were close. This was not knockdown, drag-out hockey that I thought we were going to get. I thought we were going to get grinded out 3-2, 4-3, 5-3, whatever you want. Not one of these games were close. The closest games were 5-2, were back-to-back 5-2 games, back-to-back 5-2 wins by the Blues, rather. Those were the closest games in this series. All the games were won by 3 or more goals. St. Louis wins it in 6. I guess experience pays off for the Blues. 3 years removed from a Stanley Cup. And they put their guy Jordan Binnington back in to prove that experience works. Calgary and Dallas, another one that a lot of people thought would be a short series. Calgary wins it in Game 7, having to go to overtime. The only thing about this one was Calgary only trailed the series once. They had control throughout most of it, but yeah, I think it surprised a lot of people that this one went 7. And then finally, another team in Canada that nobody seemed to think could ever get it done, could get over the hump, Edmonton and LA. Another series I'm going to talk about later on. I'm going to talk a little bit about LA. Edmonton wins the series 4-3. When Connor McDavid scored that goal on Saturday night to make it 2-0, it was a celebration, but a sigh of relief in Edmonton as well that these guys finally got over the hump, because there were a few times this series that I thought it wasn't going to happen.
Just a wild first round in general. I gotta say, from watching hockey for so long, it's been a long time since we've seen a very fun and active first round as we have had. This has been quite the first round of the NHL playoffs, which is great for all fans. Maybe not great for every fan out there, as we're going to talk about, but yeah. So kind of to get this started in terms of our first round review. Which series do we feel like was the most fun to watch? I mean, out of all the series that happened, and don't get me wrong, every series was a ton of fun to watch. Every single one. It was tough to just name one series that was the most fun. It was really, really difficult. Tom did. But Tom, what do you think was the most fun series for you to watch?
You know what? I liked Carolina and Boston a lot. And as I alluded to above, I thought after the first 2 games in Carolina that this one might end in 4 or 5. But then all of a sudden, Boston, for whatever reason, at their home at the Boston Garden, found their stride. I mean, they really found their stride. Their play at home at the Boston Garden almost reminded me of the finals back in 2011. They won 4-2 and 5-2, but then go back to Carolina and get blown out. But then all of a sudden in Game 6, and again it reminded me, they just went on a tear in Game 6 to win 5-2. And I think me and a lot of other people thought, could this be like another Game 7 in Vancouver where the pressure was all on the home team, no pressure on the Bruins? Could they go in there? Could they go in there and potentially steal this 7th game from the Canes? It didn't happen. It almost did. It came very close at the end. But at the end of the day, the Canes were the better team, and they showed it this series. And I guess the real question about this series is, could this really be it for Patrice Bergeron? Could management in Boston slowly be moving on from everybody? They've moved on from Chara. They have moved on from a lot of other guys. They moved on from Chara. They moved on from Rask. They weren't afraid to move on from Lucic and Dougie Hamilton about 5-6 years ago. And could this really be it for Patrice Bergeron? Could they not bring him back? Could they say, okay, we need to start getting a little bit younger? I guess the thing Bergeron has going in his favor is they don't have any centers lined up behind him, so he potentially could stay another year. But could management eventually say, like, listen, we need this to be David Pasternak and Charlie McAvoy's team, and we need to start handing the reins over to them and start moving on from these guys? This is the Boston Bruins. This is a team I've discussed many, many times. This is a team that's not afraid to start tearing it down before it gets too late. Remember, in 1976, they let Bobby Orr walk away. I mean, there was a little more behind that. That's something we can talk about another day about that whole story. But they let Bobby Orr walk away, and everybody back then said this team is toast. What happened after that? They went to the finals in 77 and 78 and were one Guy Lafleur goal, rest in peace, in 1979 from going to the finals to not have to face Montreal, potentially win another one in the 70s. So these Bruins, I don't know. I don't know if this could be it for them. We shall see.
Yeah, the Boston Carolina series was definitely a lot of fun. We expected Boston to be competitive in that series, though. We expected Boston to not go down easily to Carolina. That being said, Carolina looked really, really good in this particular series. A lot of fun jabs thrown here and there, especially a jab that Brad Marchand threw to Tony D'Angelo verbally. If you know, you know. Go and find that for those that want to. And just that series was great to me. I'm going to go with a series that I didn't think that this was going to be a fun series. I really thought that this was going to be a blowout, but Calgary Dallas surprised the hell out of me. That was a ton of fun to watch, more than I ever expected. The first round in general was fun, multiple game sevens, high energy. The first round was a trip, but to me, Calgary Dallas was the most fun. It had me at the edge of my seat the entire way through. It was just a back and forth series the entire way. Dallas was so much more competitive than I ever thought they would, and they were competitive because of a number of people. One person that I'm really going to talk about in a little bit. But just quick shout out to a few people on Dallas. Joe Pavelski looking great in that series. Jason Robertson also looking fantastic in that series. And I'm going to expound on him a little bit more later, but Jake Ottinger, not enough can be said about his playoff performance in net for the Dallas Stars. But for Calgary, that was their series to win. It was their series to lose. And now we get the Battle of Alberta, which is going to be awesome to watch in the second round. And we're going to be previewing that in just a little bit. Just you stick around. Moving right along. Which team surprised you the most? Who came into this first round with lower expectations in your mind and completely shocked you? Tom, who do you think?
Believe it or not, LA. I really didn't think they had what it took to push Edmonton. Granted, before this year, a lot of people labeled Edmonton as playoff chokers. But I looked at LA and I just said, man, I can't see it. Last year was a little bit different with Winnipeg. Winnipeg had the experience. But I looked at LA and I was like, I don't think they're going to be able to do much of anything in this series. You know, they went in and won game one. Edmonton won in 2 blowouts, and I said, okay, here we go. This is over. LA only came back to take a 3-2 series lead and be in the driver's seat going back home to win this thing. Obviously, Edmonton came back and took the series. But wow, I really did not think the Kings, were going to push the Oilers 7 games in this series. I really didn't. And hats off to them. I guess the sad part about it is it's like at first I was going with the Oilers, especially after game 5, I was going, where have we seen this movie before? Thinking about that bubble series with the Hawks a couple years ago where they couldn't get by Chicago. But you want to know what? The Oilers overcame it. And you know what? I got to give the Kings credit. And I guess the unfortunate part about it with this LA Kings team is could this very well be the last hurrah for this group? They talk about a lot of last dances in these playoffs. Whether it be Bergeron up in Boston, and it's just really Bergeron up there. I don't think the rest of the team's going to get gutted. They talk about Pittsburgh with potentially Malkin and Letang not coming back. Talk about Washington with their aging stars and bad contracts. And you got to think the same thing about LA. You know, could this be, Dustin Brown is going to retire. He's done. Game 7 was his last game. Anze Kopitar, Jonathan Quick, and Drew Doughty are not getting any younger. Granted, they have some good players in the system, some good prospects coming up. But at the end of the day, this was a veteran LA team led by these veteran guys. And, they went out valiantly, but, those guys who won 2 cups in 3 years out there back in 2012 and 2014, this may very well have been their last gasp in playoff hockey. This may have been their goodbye to playoff hockey because I think you're going to start seeing a lot of them retire soon in a few years.
Could honestly happen. And I'll give a quick shout out to LA on this one. I'll kind of expand on that one. First of all, it should be noted, had LA actually gone a little bit further in this playoffs, there was talks now that LA is out that Drew Doughty was actually going to be ready if they made it to the conference final, which would have been crazy to see a healthy Drew Doughty give LA that extra push if they had gone a little bit further. They honestly could have. They really did a great job. We are seeing a changing of the guard in LA, but that being said, I don't know if this is fully it for them. I don't know if this is their twilight. I think it's the twilight for a few players on this team, namely a quick shout out to Dustin Brown, who officially retires at the conclusion of this round. enjoy your retirement and happy career renaissance to you from last year. And then another quick shout out to Jonathan Quick, who took me on a complete nostalgia trip with how stellar his playing was in net in this series for LA. Jonathan Quick really, really looked like the Jonathan Quick of old. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch some old Stanley Cup videos from 2012, from 2014. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Even some U.S. Olympics from the early 2010s as well, when he looked fantastic. It could be the twilight, at least for now, but I think we're going to see a resurgence by LA in no time flat. Mark my words on that one. To me, Dallas was the one that really surprised me. I really did not think that they were going to go toe-to-toe with Calgary at all. It was a great performance all around, and I thought they were a team that was doomed to get swept, and going to 7 games was quite the accomplishment. I mean, had Dallas had gone to the next round, they didn't even need to win the Stanley Cup at that point. Getting as far as they did was an accomplishment enough. This was a team that at the beginning of April did not look like a playoff team. It looked like that they were going to give it to Vegas. And lo and behold, they took Calgary to the brink and really made Calgary work in that series. So hats off to Dallas for their performance. We had teams that surprised us. We also had teams that disappointed us. In the first round, Tom, what team disappointed you the most? And for both of us, why was it the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yet again in the driver's seat, and yet again they blew it. And I mean, if you go through their history of failures, and I mean, you could write a book on all the failures, you know, since they won that last cup in 67. You talk about that Harold Ballard era where the team was run terribly, and I do feel bad for the Leafs fans in those days who constantly sold out the old Maple Leaf Gardens to watch a mediocre to terrible team play, and they just kept coming back. You know, you talk about 93 and Wayne Gretzky when he dominated Game 7 and he high-stick Doug Gilmour in overtime in Game 6. But, I mean, come on, guys. They weren't beating the Habs in 93. They were not. You know, and then you talk about those late 90s, early 2000s teams with guys like Sundin and McGillney and Roberts, and that 04 team where they loaded up with Ron Francis, Joe Newman, like Brian Leach and the like. Unfortunately, those guys were all really, really old at that time. So if you had that team 5 or 10 years earlier, I could call them a Stanley Cup contender. But, you know, those late 90s, early 2000s teams they had were good. They were good. But I don't think they were ever good enough to win a Stanley Cup. I just don't think so. You know, and you go back to Game 7 in 2013 where they blew the 4-1 lead in Boston. But this is not a Ranger fan bias here, guys. Let's be real. You weren't beating the Rangers in 2013 if you got them in the following round. You just weren't. But these last 5 with this group that they have with these you know, Game 7s, I mean, you can discount 2018 with Boston. They were still kind of young and upcoming, and Boston had the experience. But, you know, you go to 2019, and they were in the driver's seat against the Bruins and lost. You know, if they would have won that, they would have had Columbus and Carolina to play next. The Leafs probably could have gone to the finals those years and maybe even beat the Blues. You know, you go into 2020 where they blew it against Columbus, and it's the same thing. You know, they would have had, I think, Tampa in the following round, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember how they reseeded it. I want to just double check one thing. No, they actually would have had Boston again. They would have had Boston again, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because it's very difficult to figure this out because we were talking about this years and years ago, and now I don't really remember it much. No, yeah, they would have been 5, 6, 7. They would have had Tampa. I apologize. So maybe they didn't beat Tampa in 2020. Tampa won the cup, but go to last year too, where they blew it against Montreal. You know, if they blew it against Montreal, there was a chance for them last year to potentially to potentially get themselves into a Final Four and maybe the finals last year too. And it's sort of the same thing this year. You're in the driver's seat. You have a chance to put away the defending Stanley Cup champions. You have a lead in Game 6 down in Tampa. All you got to do is put it away. You can't put it away. You have a few chances in overtime to put it away. You can't put it away. And then you come home. Saturday night, Game 7 in your building, hockey night in Canada. You know, the epicenter of the hockey universe, and they looked like they were deers in the headlights. It looked like they were playing scared. They looked like they had no idea what they were doing that night. And this is yet again, another first round that the Leafs blew, that if they didn't blow it, they might have had a chance to go far and to go to another finals, like in 2019 and like last year, where they would have had a chance to at least get to a conference finals, and maybe even win a Stanley Cup. And they blew it yet again. I don't know what to think about the Leafs anymore. I really, really don't. So many years I say, okay, they're finally going to get over the hump this year. They're finally going to get over the hump this year, and they never do. They never do. And they seem to just not address certain facets of their game. I thought bringing Giordano would be a good idea. It didn't work. The goaltending wasn't great. John Tavares disappeared. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, you look at what a team like Pittsburgh did back in the mid-2000s, where you had Crosby and Malkin there, but then you had other supporting casts like James Neal and like Jerome McGinley and all these other forwards they brought in. And they had to jettisoned a lot of those guys off, and they wound up winning 2 cups in a row. So the real question about it is here, you have your 2 rocks there in Matthews and Tavares. Do you jettison off a guy like a Nylander or a Marner this summer to bring in a defenseman? Or do you jettison these guys off just to, bring younger players in to maybe get better and maybe finally end this curse? Because right now it's going to be a 56-year curse up in Toronto. Something that if you said to somebody back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, especially the 40s and 60s, that it would have said you're nuts. They would have said that'll never ever happen. Yeah. What more can you say about these guys? It's sad. I feel bad for the fans. Toronto Maple Leaf fans are some of the most dedicated people, in sports. The management team, I give it to them. At least they're trying now. At least they're not living off the brand of the Toronto Maple Leafs anymore. But I just think that they're still doing it a little bit the wrong way. And it is very sad. It's sad for these Leafs fans. 56 years and counting, and, you sit there every year. You have the tools to do it. You have your good regular seasons. You sit there and you think this is finally it, and it's never it. It's never it.
It's what happens when you don't prioritize goaltending and defense. Just plain and simple.
And they just need to get one of the two. They either need to get themselves a legit number 1 defenseman, or they need to get themselves a legit number 1 goalie. But I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I don't mean to repeat myself.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for you in a second. I mean, isn't Morgan Riley supposed to be that, though?
He's supposed to be that. But hear me out. Hear me out. When they signed John Tavares back in the summer of 2018, they were going off a blueprint of what Pittsburgh was doing. Pittsburgh had an elite Crosby and elite Malkin down the middle, and they had a Chris Letang on D. And I guess you could compare Morgan Riley and Chris Letang as they're good defensemen, but I doubt they're ever winning a Norris Trophy. And then you had a guy like Matt Murray in net, and him and Flower were kind of swapping the net. And neither of those, Fleury and Pittsburgh, Marc-Andre Fleury was never winning a Vezina Trophy. Matt Murray was never winning a Vezina Trophy. But they went out there and won Stanley Cups. And I think that when Brendan Shanahan and Kyle Dubas looked at that after they jettisoned Lou Lamoriello off, they said, well, if they can do it, why can't we? And it just hasn't worked.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, there's a couple things that I can, talk about here. I mean, first of all, what more can be said about Toronto at this point? 5 years in a row with a first-round exit. A team that is currently stuck in playoff purgatory. You're great, and you're good enough to get to the playoffs, but once you get there, sayonara. You get a cup of coffee, and you're off to the golf course. Something's got to give. A team this talented, and with the number of players that are so talented on this team, a first-round exit is not acceptable, and it's terrible. And even the players accept that and accept that it's not acceptable. A big offseason looms for them. There's a lot of questions. What do they need to do? Jack Campbell, their current starting goaltender, is an unrestricted free agent, and there's not much behind him currently. You have an injured Peter Mrazek. You've got, I think Michael Hutchinson is still in their system somewhere, like down in, like with the Toronto Marlies maybe. But other than that, there's really nothing coming up the pipeline for them. Do you move on from him, or do you pay him to come back at this point? That's a big question mark. Do you trade a forward like Tom alluded to before? Do you trade a William Nylander? Do you trade a Mitch Marner? Do you trade somebody along that line to see if you can pick up a better defenseman, a better goaltender, something out there? And this is all granted that both Jack Campbell leaves and that also Mark Giordano leaves. That being said, Mark Giordano he's not the number 1 defenseman that he used to be. He was very serviceable in the playoffs and definitely gave Toronto the push that they needed. but he can't do it by himself. You need a full support staff there. Tom had mentioned John Tavares before, and I completely agree. He, to me, was invisible, which I had to go and look at his playoff stats from this past year. He had 6 points in 7 games. Where was I for that? That's the quietest 6 points in 7 games I have ever seen. The dude was invisible on the ice, and he's the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. This isn't like you're the captain of the Arizona Coyotes or the captain of the New York Islanders right now. You're the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You've got to carry your team. Austin Matthews can't do it by himself. Mitch Marner cannot do it by himself. Something's got to give. Is this the last year that we saw Sheldon Keefe behind the bench? With the names that are currently floating out there in the coach job market at the moment, does Toronto move on from Sheldon Keefe and bring in a head coach with Stanley Cup experience? Someone like Barry Trotz, someone like Peter DeBoer, even someone like John Tortorella to really kick some ass and maybe even wreck a club. But
I don't think Tortorella's ever going back to Canada after Vancouver. And I don't think that's the Canadian franchise. I think that's him. I don't think he wants anything to do with Canada ever again.
I completely agree. It's going to be really interesting for Toronto no matter what. We're going to be monitoring Toronto very heavily this summer for sure. Lastly, the Pittsburgh Penguins, to me, was a major disappointment. After losing Game 7, after being up in the series 3-1, they had the Rangers on the ropes 3-1. Yeah, I know, Tom, I know. But this team proved one thing. They cannot succeed without Sidney Crosby on the ice. Pittsburgh let the Rangers back into that series after Sidney Crosby went down with a concussion.
And it's not to toot my own horn as a Ranger fan, but the observation in Game 5 was after he left, the rest of that second period and the third period, the Penguins looked lost in Game 5. They looked like deers in the headlights.
They look completely lost without a game manager there. And Sidney Crosby is a game manager. Say what you will about Sidney Crosby, if he's a soft player or, a prima donna or a diva or whatever. There is no doubt about it. He is a generational player who will go down as one of the greatest hockey players that has ever played the game. And that might be a hot take from me, but I know that there are plenty of other people that share that same opinion as me. He is one of the greatest hockey players to ever play the game, to ever lace up a pair of skates. And without him, Pittsburgh didn't have a chance. And I always say it, any team that has Sidney Crosby has a fighting chance in the playoffs. What was their greatest downfall, I feel like, in Game 7 was starting Tristan Jarry knowing that his foot was still broken. That is a terrible decision. Don't get me wrong. Tristan Jarry is a fantastic goaltender, and he proved me wrong this season after I trashed him last season. But he's not effective if he's not healthy. He's on one foot. I don't care if Louis Domingue is the third string goalie. I don't care that Casey DeSmith was also injured. You start Louis Domingue. He carried you through that series. You give him the benefit of the doubt. You start him in that game because a goalie with 2 feet is better than one with 1 foot. It's just.
I just think after Game 5 and Game 6, where they had those leads and they let the Rangers back in, I think Sullivan said enough is enough. But how many? And I don't mean to interrupt you, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record. But you look at that franchise's blueprint since 2015. It's rely heavily on Crosby and Malkin on your first 2 lines, and it worked a little bit where they won 2 cups, and it almost worked again in 2018. Where if that overtime goal for DC doesn't go in Game 6 in Pittsburgh and they go back for another Game 7, who's to say the Pens don't come out and go win a 3rd cup in a row? But since then, they can't get themselves out of the first round, and they keep relying on it, and it's obviously not working anymore. Bring in mediocre, middle-of-the-road goalies. Fill your bottom 6 up, and trading Phil Kessel was dumb on them too. Fill your bottom 6 up with whoever. Jeff Carter is a good replacement, but we talked about the Jeff Carter deal. We're not going to talk about it again. But, this playing with fire and saying, okay, let's rely on 2 or 3 guys and just fill the rest of the spots in with guys from wherever, it's obviously not working anymore. Worked for a while, but it's not working anymore.
Yeah, overall, just disappointing in general. All right, Tom, let's keep this one quick. to round out our first round review. Oh my God, I got to stop saying preview because I just want to move on to the second round already, just like everybody else does. It's the first night without hockey in a little while. We're all pent up a little bit. Tom, I want you to pick a player or two that you feel was the MVP of their series, or players you feel like needs to be mentioned for their outstanding play in the first round.
I mean, in a losing cause, and I hate to give this guy credit, he's a Pittsburgh Penguin, but he's Jake Gensel, 10 points in 7 games. Even without Crosby, he looked good. He looked very good out there in game 6. 10 points in 7 games, huge asset. Another guy who finally got his team over the hump, Connor McDavid, 14 points in 7 games. Some games he had to take the Oilers on his back, and, he showed why he is the best hockey player in the world right now. He really did. I guess honorable mention of Nathan McKinnon, but it's a 4-game sweep against a backup. I'm more curious to see what McKinnon's going to do in the next round. But I would say probably those 3. I can't toot my own horn with anybody on the Rangers because nobody really played all that well. They just, were able to take advantage of a couple situations.
Yeah. The biggest person I need to mention for me, the biggest MVP, period, Jake Ottinger for the Dallas Stars in net. He was one of the only reasons Dallas made it as far as they did. I was stunned by his performance, and he himself is technically a third-string goalie in his right, because technically on the depth chart for Dallas, it goes Braden Holtby, Anton Khudobin, and then Jake Ottinger. Now, not so much. Jake Ottinger has probably got that starting job after his performance in this series, and if he doesn't, that's Dallas's fault. But he played with a lot of heart. He made some unbelievable saves. He practically stood on his head out there. Ottinger gave Dallas the best chance to win, and had Dallas won, he would have been the sole reason why Dallas made it on to the next round. I just want to read off his playoff stats real quick because it is just absurd. He faced 285 shots, 272 saves. He had a save percentage of .954 with a 1.81 goals against average. That is elite. So good. Hats off to Jake Ottinger. Probably one of the best round performances in the playoffs, period. Enjoy the golf course for now, but I really wish I could be watching him in the second round. I'm not going to lie. Another player that stuck out to me, former New York Ranger here for Tom, Tampa Bay Lightning defenseman Ryan McDonagh. He made some key blocks and defensive plays against Toronto. He robbed Austin Matthews of an empty net on a power play and sacrificed the body and blocked it. And then eventually in that game took another block the other way and scored, took it coast to coast. He was one of the biggest reasons why Tampa Bay was able to advance the next round. The last person I want to mention here, I got to give it to Antti Raanta, the backup goaltender for the Carolina Hurricane, who really gave Boston a lot of difficulty and played insanely well in starting goaltender Freddie Anderson's absence. And Antti Raanta going into the second round, he's still probably going to get the net, even with Freddie Anderson being ready and potentially cleared to play to start the second round. Something interesting to note and watch as we move along. Time to move away from the first round. It's time to preview the second round real quick because we've got some interesting matchups looming. We've got 4 matchups that we got to preview here. Starting on the East Coast, we are previewing first the New York Rangers versus the Carolina Hurricane. Tom, what's your prediction for this series? Are you going to be upset by this one?
I'm not sure I'm going to be upset, because if there's going to be an upset, it'd be the Rangers winning this series. Because I think that would be the biggest upset out of all of these. But at the same time, I think the series has the potential to have an upset. I used the word upset entirely too many times just now. Anyways, if the Rangers lose, I won't be upset, because I think they're going to lose. As terrible as it sounds. I'm going with Carolina in 6 here, and that's even me being generous, because I think that Carolina could probably win it in less games if the Rangers don't show up. It's going to come down to goaltending. The Rangers do have the advantage with Igor Shesterkin. Best goalie in the league. He got himself a taste of the playoffs. I think he finally got whatever demons he had out of his head. I mean, if you watched how he played last night, he looked like the Igor Shesterkin Vezina Trophy winner that you saw during the regular season. He came to play last night. So all I can do is hope that he keeps playing like that in this next series. The Rangers need to have all hands on deck if they want to win it. There were a lot of games this past series against Pittsburgh where it was only certain players contributing, whether it be the kid line in games 3 and 4. and Game 5 to a lesser extent with Lafreniere. You know, Mika and Panarin. You know, Panarin scored the OT winner last night, but it was kind of quiet the rest of the series. Mika didn't come alive till the last 2 games of the series. Everyone was wondering where he was. So basically, the Rangers are going to need to play complete games here if they want to win this at all. Carolina's no joke. They're a good team. At the same time, Carolina couldn't win one single road game in Boston against a team that I didn't think they would beat, but a lot of other people thought they would beat, and it'd be a short series. They couldn't muster up one win at the Boston Garden, and not one of those games was close. And another thing to say about the Canes that I saw that there were maybe some cracks showing in the armor was that after being a juggernaut down in Raleigh, the Bruins pushed them to a point to the brink the other day. The Bruins were very close to tying that game, very close to taking it to OT. Carolina looked human, after all, on their home ice the other night. So could fatigue and could cockiness be catching up with these Hurricanes? We don't know. So it's a lot of what-if factors in the series. But you know what? Right now, as a non-biased person, even though I am a Ranger fan, I got to go Carolina in 6 for the time being. But I'm telling you what, winning this last series and playing the Canes tough in this series is only going to help the Rangers down the line.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, the Rangers making it this far is certainly a great thing. I know a lot of people have them as favorites, but they're facing a brick wall that is Carolina right now. And the Rangers have played very well, but Carolina has just been playing that much better. The key to victory for the Rangers is Igor Shesterkin not getting distracted by his own name in a stadium that is not his, because Rangers fans are supportive. They give the Igor chant, and he thrives off that. But my God, in Pittsburgh, Igor.
Only games 3 and 4, though. He was fine Friday night.
Yeah, but 10 goals in 2 games. That's
okay, but
painful.
Somebody on the radio today on NHL Network on XM brought up the same thing, that Jonathan Quick in 2014, I believe it was either Anaheim or San Jose, one of those series, he got chased in the first 2 games, and the Kings wound up skating away with Stanley Cup that year.
That's true. I'm not denying that. I'm not taking away from Igor Shesterkin whatsoever. He's nominated for the Vezina Trophy in his own right. He's probably winning that trophy this year, if I'm being honest. And there's also a reason why he's nominated for the Hart Trophy this year. We haven't seen that in a very long time, and it rightfully deserved. I mean, Igor has carried the Rangers on his back. So he needs to be in Hart Trophy form for the Rangers and not get distracted by the crowd, because as bad as Pittsburgh crowd is and as much as they can get into a team's head, Carolina Stadium and fans are that much worse. And they're some of the best in the league at really getting under team skins.
But you have a ton of transplants down there, ton of New York transplants who have North Carolina state driver's license because of that stupid rule that they put in that they won't settle people who don't live in North Carolina. I think you might have a little more fan support down there. The Ranger fans come out in droves down in North Carolina. They do.
That is true. All that being said, though, I think Carolina has the edge in this one. I think, honestly, they've done better consistently on the scoreboard, and I feel like they're a little bit stronger at the moment on defense than the Rangers. No knock on the Rangers. The Rangers going this far is awesome, and they're going to go back next year and probably the year after that. But it's just not the year quite yet for the Rangers. I think it's going to be Carolina in 6. And as Tom said, that might be being generous, but I think the Rangers are going to make this a competitive series. Next, we're going to preview the other Eastern Conference matchup, the battle for Florida, which we all kind of hope Florida just sinks somewhere, maybe just detaches from the U.S. But the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Florida Panthers. Tom, I know you've got a hot take here, so let's hear it.
Bolts in 7. And if Florida wants to win this series, they need to get it done early. Because here's the thing, you know, they had a couple stinkers against Washington there, and there were times where Washington looked a lot better than they did. But at the same time, this is an aging Washington Capitals hockey team. These Tampa Bay Lightning are 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. They're no strangers to having to go play a Game 7 and win it, no matter where it is. So if Florida really, really wants this, they got to get this done early. Like, they got to really take it over this series early to get Tampa out. Because I'm telling you, the longer this series goes, the more Tampa is gonna grip their sticks tighter, and the more they're gonna take away the space from Florida. I think Florida just got by on the age of Washington in that last round. I really do. I gotta go with Tampa here. Tampa in 7.
Either way, I think this series is going to 7 games. I think we've got another knockdown, drag-out affair. If you guys remember the first round last year, Florida versus Tampa Bay, that was the best matchup of the first round last year. I am so excited for the rematch here. And I think Florida's going to finally get redemption this year. I think they have all the tools to get redemption this year on the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's one player that I'm going to say to watch in this series, and that's Carter Verhaeghe. And I meant to mention him real quick beforehand in my first round review as an honorable mention. 12 points in 6 games, 6 goals, 6 assists. I mean, he's been fantastic in this playoff. Another player that's also stuck out in my mind is Claude Giroux, who was recently acquired from the Philadelphia Flyers. He's really stepped up as a leader on this team, and that's one thing that this Florida team has in droves. They've got leadership on this team between Claude Giroux, Alexander Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, who I think was absolutely snubbed for the Hart Trophy this year, but that's a discussion for a different time. Yeah, I think Florida finally has the makings to maybe win this series, get over the hump, and move on to the Eastern Conference Final. The key to victory for them is consistent play by Sergei Bobrovsky. He's currently sporting a .906 save percentage and a .279 goals against average. Certainly not bad, but for a guy of what they're paying for him, he needs to step up a little bit more in this series if he wants to get the edge against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has a lot going for them as well. I want to see Andrei Vasilevsky step up a little bit more in this series because he did not look like himself in the first round. And I'll be really curious to see how he responds in the second round. He's certainly a guy with 2 Stanley Cups to his name, so he knows exactly what it takes to make it all the way to the end and hoist that Stanley Cup. It's going to be interesting to watch. Could we see Tampa Bay three-peat this year? We're just going to have to watch and see. Moving on to the Western Conference, we're going to preview possibly not a throwaway series, but maybe an interesting series. The Colorado Avalanche versus the St. Louis Blues. I was a little bit disappointed to see Minnesota get knocked out by the Blues. I really thought Minnesota had what it took to knock out St. Louis, but St. Louis came in with a head of steam, and now they're going to carry that steam against the Colorado Avalanche. Tom, what's your prediction here?
I do think the Avs get a taste of reality here. I really do. I think that, they ran over Nashville, kind of like they ran over these same Blues last year. But that being said, I think the Avs finally do get over that second round hump and get themselves into that Western Conference Finals this year. I'm going Avs in 6, but I think there's going to be a few games there where people are going to be openly wondering, do these guys have what it takes to win the whole thing? But I am giving the series to Colorado in 6.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you that I think Colorado gets a taste of reality, and they're going to get really surprised by this St. Louis team. St. Louis, who is also sporting 2 of the better goaltenders in this current playoff right now, in Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso. Both have been fantastic. I mean, more notably, Jordan Binnington in the 3 games that he started has been lights out, to be honest, for St. Louis. So I'll be interested to see if they give him the reins for the second round. Yeah, I think the Avs are going to get a taste of reality. St. Louis is going to challenge him. The Avalanche, I think, will prevail in this series. I'm going to say the Avalanche are going to win, but they're going to win in 7, I say. I think they're going to get taken all the way to the brink for them to finally, come out on top in this particular series. Darcy Kemper needs to keep playing well in this series. He's played really, really well in the first round. He had that injury scare. He's going to be just fine for the start of this series. I thought it was a really, really smart move for Colorado to sit him in Game 5 against Nashville, just to make sure that there was no damage done for him just starting. You knew that you were probably winning that game anyway. It made sense for Pavel Francouz to start that game. And Francouz can come in if need be and, take it if Darcy Kemper goes down again, which is something that I complained about with the Colorado Avalanche this offseason, is they needed to solidify that net. Darcy Kemper has proved me wrong so far. He has been a very good goaltender in the playoffs. He's got to continue that in the second round, though. Moving on to probably the most anticipated matchup, the last matchup that we're previewing here in the second round. It's the battle for Alberta. It's Edmonton versus Calgary. Tom, hot take incoming?
I don't know if it's really a hot take, and I'm going to explain to you why. Both of these teams were predicted to get out of this first round series without a scratch on them. It was just going to be an easy 4 or 5 game ordeal, even though I thought Calgary was going 6. The thing is that both teams got taken to 7 games. So Calgary has the home ice. Yes, Calgary does have the home ice. We give them that. We don't give them that. That's what they have, rather. But look at it from a historical perspective here, and say what you will, history is on Edmonton's side. It is. If you look at goaltending, you obviously give the nod to Calgary. You look at defense, I think you're kind of even. You look at the depth, you give it to Calgary. Yes. But you look at the history of this series. These teams met in 1983, 1984, 1986, 1988, and 1991. Every series went in Edmonton's favor except for the 1986 one with that Steve Smith botch clear out that went in off Grant Fuhr's skate. But every other one went Edmonton's way. Now, I know you talk about the playoffs and how, you need your depth to do your jobs too. Your third and fourth line to contribute and have big moments. But at the same time, you do need your stars to show up. And all year long, the talk in Calgary was that first line was their top line of Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk, and Elias Lindholm. Let's read off the stats lines for these guys. Johnny Gaudreau in the first 7 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Matthew Tkachuk, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. Elias Lindholm, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. Look over to Edmonton right now. Connor McDavid in the first 7 games, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. Leon Draisaitl, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. Evander Kane, pleasant surprise, 7 goals, 2 assists, 9 points. And we'll throw Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in there, but he's more on the level of, say, the 3 I just mentioned in Calgary. So the real question about it is that, you can rely on your goaltending and you can rely on your D and your depth as much as you want for Calgary. But if it comes down to a big moment, who would I rather have? And the answer is I'd rather have McDavid and Draisaitl. And I think if it comes down to a moment in the end of the game where you really need a clutch goal to get scored or you really need somebody to shine in that spotlight, the advantage goes to the Edmonton Oilers. So it's probably going to be, I'm not going to say a repeat of 86 because that was kind of an upset. And I think a lot of people had Edmonton way ahead of Calgary. But, go look back at that great 1991 battle of Alberta between these two. And at that time, they were evenly matched. Because remember, at that time, the Oilers no longer had Wayne Gretzky or Paul Coffey anymore. So the teams were pretty evenly matched, and they were both defending Stanley Cup champions at the time. And, both teams, I would say both teams were evenly matched in just about every area. And I think at this point, too, I think the Oilers maybe have the nod with the top 6 forwards. But I just think overall, if you just put all the numbers overall together, it's a pretty evenly matched series. So I think it's a repeat of 91. In 91, Calgary had the home ice, but Edmonton came out on top in 7 games. And I'm going Edmonton coming out on top in this one in 7 games, which would set up a conference final that I've been wanting to see since we started doing this show, to finally see Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid face off against each other for a right to go play for the Stanley Cup.
It would be a ton of fun to watch that matchup. I am not going to deny that. Do I think that happens this year? Short answer, no. Long answer, no, because Edmonton barely made it out of a series that they should have won in 5 games, and that's just me being honest.
But didn't Calgary do the same thing?
Fair. Point taken. But LA should not have given them as much trouble as they did. No knock on LA. Same for Calgary. They should have won that series in 5 or 6 games as well. No knock on Dallas. But in Edmonton's case, what happens when you actually face a better goaltender in Jacob Markstrom? It's a different story for Calgary in this case. Calgary came in facing a hot goaltender in Jake Ottinger and hit a wall. You're coming in now and going to the opposite end of the spectrum. You're going from a 23-year-old goaltender who hit his stride to a 41-year-old goaltender in Mike Smith, who admittedly is playing really, really well, sporting a .934 save percentage at the moment. But that train's never late. Mike Smith, he's no spring chicken anymore. He's still one of the best puck-handling goaltenders currently in the playoffs, not named Igor Shesterkin, but I got to give the edge to Calgary here in a lot of ways. I think Calgary could come in clutch. I think Edmonton is going to get a sweet dose of reality here and really go back to the drawing board and really kind of figure out that situation in net this summer, because they need to. They need a high-profile goaltender to really come in and solidify this team, because they have everything in place otherwise. They've got 4 deep lines. They've got a decent defensive core. All that's missing is a consistent goaltender. Mike Smith, no knock on him whatsoever. He's a fantastic goaltender. And to play as long as he has is amazing. But that sun is very quickly setting. And I just think it's just a wrong place, wrong time. I'm going to say Calgary. I'm going to give a hot take here. I'm going to say Calgary in 5. And I know that that's not what a lot of people want to hear, but get your pitchforks, get your torches, whatever you want. I think it's going to set up a really good Western Conference final with Colorado and Calgary. I just want to see a grudge match between Matt Tkachuk and Nathan MacKinnon, because that's going to be fun. As much fun as it would be to watch Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon square off, I also do want to see what Matt Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau do against the Colorado team as well, especially with Jonathan Markstrom in net. But before we leave you guys today, we've got to talk about our question of the day. And question's simple, and we'll keep it quick. What matchup in the second round excites you most, Tom? I already know what matchup you're going to talk about here.
The one I just talked about, Battle of Alberta. You know, last year we got an old-fashioned Montreal-Toronto series, but I guess the unfortunate part about it is that maybe the last time those two teams were ever in a competitive series together was probably sometime in the 1960s, because the 2 times they met in the 1970s, it was a wash. Montreal was heavily favored, Toronto was mediocre, and last year Toronto was heavily favored and Montreal was mediocre, but Montreal somehow won. This is a little bit different, because there's still a lot of people around who remember those 80s and early 90s battles with these teams. And unlike Montreal and Toronto, who you had one on one end of the pedestal and the other on the other end of the pedestal, these guys are pretty evenly matched. It's going to be fun to watch. I guess the only unfortunate part about it for me is that it's the same nights as the Rangers and Hurricanes. That's the only bad part. So if we get another triple overtime thriller, I probably won't see any of it. Just like I really didn't see any of Colorado and Nashville because it was the same nights as the Rangers. I think I saw a little bit of Game 3. I was going to the Red Bulls game and watched a little bit of Game 3 in this bar called Bellows that I go to. Great bar if you're ever in Newark.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got to agree. Battle of Alberta is probably the one I'm going to be watching the most and watching closely the most. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Battle of Florida, just because of the hype from last year from that first round. Tampa Bay versus Florida is going to be a fun matchup. Make sure you guys go out of your way and watch that. And just watch playoff hockey in general. Hockey is fun, and playoff hockey is even more fun. But thank you guys for checking us out here again. And make sure to subscribe down below. What do you guys think of our takes today? Let us know in the comment section down below. Make sure you also drop a like while you're there. Hit the subscribe button. And thank you guys for all of your continued support. If you want to check out our content elsewhere, you can check us out on our website, iadsports.com. While you're there, get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8 in our shop. And if you follow us on Twitter, or rather, if you're on Twitter and you don't follow us Follow us down below at I80_sports NHL. If you follow us already, thank you all so much for all of your support. Without you guys, we can't do this on a weekly basis. But away we go. Time to watch some playoff hockey yet again. And we'll be here to recap the second round and talk about the conference finals very near afterwards. But we'll be back soon with that. Until then, I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been yet another episode of NHL on I80 Sports.